So, good afternoon, all of you. Thank you very much for being with us in the European Parliament on this afternoon. Very interesting discussion and presentation of defunding disinformation in the Balkans, how international brands support Russian agenda. It's indeed a very sensitive topic because the European Parliament is dealing in this mandate on various committees, in the two special committees, INGE 1, INGE 2, but also in the LIBE committee, very extensive with the interference of third countries, especially now after the invasion in Ukraine of Russia, in the European Union, but also in the candidate countries in the Western Balkan. And I'm very glad to give the opportunity here to be the host of this very high expert debate on and presentation on the funding of the distinguished speaker of this afternoon. This is also, as I understood, possibility for online connection, and I hope this will work technically in a few moments for those who would like to follow the presentations online. Thank you very much again, and I would like to give the floor to the moderator, Mr. Peter Horrocks. He's member of the International Advisory Board and Balkan Free Media Initiative. Peter, please, the floor is yours, and you take the moderation of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrei, and I'm sure we'd all like to thank Mr. Kovatchev for hosting this and for highlighting the importance of the issue of information quality in Southeast Europe, in the Balkans, and your support for this and your hosting of this event is very welcome. As you said, Andrei, I'm a member of the board of the Balkan Free Media Initiative, an organisation that was set up a few years ago to support the quality of independent media, a real need in that part of the world. And I'm going to be moderating this afternoon. Let me just briefly describe the shape of our conversation. We're going to take it broadly in two parts. The first part, we will look at our forthcoming report and the research that we've done, which highlights disinformation issues in Serbia. And then we will focus on television advertising and the policy issues and the policy interventions that Western governments, that the European Parliament, that corporate interests might have to deal with that issue of information quality. And then we will look at Bulgaria and the issues of disinformation that have been identified there. And for that, we will then focus particularly on online advertising and the policies and remedies that can potentially be used in relation to Bulgaria. And then, having looked at those two countries with reference to those two platforms, we'll pull out and consider some broader considerations in relation to media freedom, in relation to EU policies. And at that point, we will also open it up to questions and discussion from the floor, because as an organisation that stands for open discussion and an exchange of views, we want to make sure that happens. So that's the broad shape. So first of all, I'd like to ask Raša to introduce himself and to speak to the issues of disinformation and the role that international advertising plays in supporting disinformation in the country of Serbia. Raša.
Thank you very much. My name is Raša Nedeljkov. I'm coming from Serbian Democracy Defending organization. We are trying to fight for democracy in our country. One of the biggest influencers in democracy, not only in our country, are the media. And we are quite diligently scrutinizing the work of the media in Serbia. In a sense of the context, Serbian citizens are mainly consuming information, news from the TV stations. And the most influential TV stations in Serbia are terrestrial national covering the whole territory of Serbia. There are 5 of them. 4 are commercial, 1 is national broadcast service. And from the democracy point of view, we are analyzing 2 aspects. One is to what extent these media are promoting values of democracies, and to what extent values of authoritarian regimes and countries. And I can tell you that for the past 6 years, how long we are assessing the pluralism in our media is that our media, national media, are basically reporting negatively about the EU, negatively about all the countries of the political West, and positively about Russia and about China. So that is how the media are reporting about the international partners or actors in Serbia. But what they're doing on the domestic part, what kind of source of democracy they could be for their own citizens. So I can just give you one example that 95% of all interlocutors in news, central news, on these 5 national most influential TV stations are coming from one political group, ruling majority group. And out of all interlocutors, 63% is one person, President of Serbia. In 2022, President of Serbia had 300 live addresses, averaging 45 minutes. So if you are questioning whether we have open, pluralistic, democratic, non-biased media in Serbia, take into account these figures. So as a democracy defenders, we wanted to actually find ways on how to influence this situation. And one of the big sustainers of this kind of existence of media landscape in Serbia are advertisers. And who are the biggest advertiser in Serbia? More than 60% are coming from the countries of the political West. So companies from European countries are basically sustaining media apparatus in Serbia that are promoting EU in a negative way and reporting about, for example, war in Ukraine in a way that you could not distinguish whether it's a Kremlin propaganda or Serbian propaganda. And just to conclude, in a recent couple of months, we are closely watching and trying to actually prove this thesis that our media are the sources of the disinformation. And what we proved is, or found in our research, is that the main source of disinformation in Serbian media are the public officials, domestic journalists, and media itself are content creators. So for example, just a couple of months ago on the TV station with the biggest reach in Serbia called Pink, is creating a Pink reality for Serbian citizens. They, for example, negated massacre in Bucha. So that was published in a program that was in between commercials from German company Lidl. Similarly comes to the, for example, Dutch company Deleuze, who is competing with Lidl in the market in Serbia. So negating massacre in Bucha, denazifying Ukraine, or, for example, messages that Germany will invade soon Poland are one of the examples of the messages that are continuously being presented to Serbian media and that are sustained by the companies who are advertising in these media. So we would like to try to make these companies aware what kind of reality they are sustaining for the Serbian citizens from the perspective that we are, for example, right now on the lowest support to the European Union. And one of the biggest consequences of this kind of media reporting is just there. So I think for now.
Thank you, Raša. So can I ask Claire to introduce herself and her organisation and then to help us to understand how is television advertising and the standards and the guidelines around television advertising supposed to work internationally?
Hello, thank you for having me today. My name is Claire Atkin, and I'm here representing Check My Ads. We are the ad tech watchdog. So the way that we see the internet and television is that we see it as a funnel of ideas. So you can capture people's attention and then bring them to a place where then they are attracted by and captured by tools of marketing. And we find that although the internet has been used many times over to create a funnel for selling products and services, that now it is being used to sell ideas for radicalization. Now for advertising, there are two different ways that ads go to media. There is direct and there is programmatic. If they are directly being sold, if the ads are being put on the television channel directly, then it is through media agencies, buying agencies, who have to actually call up a sales group. If the television is online, then it has to be bought programmatically, and it goes through middlemen. In this case, they are terrestrial and it is online, and so we have identified the 3 media agencies that are most likely buying ads on these channels. And we don't know if the advertisers know that they are there. So Procter & Gamble and Coca-Cola and Lidl are very likely not aware that they are actually on these pro-Russian disinformation channels, and that is what we are here to talk about today.
Thank you, Claire, and we'll dive into that in further detail, I'm sure, in a few minutes when we've heard about Bulgaria. So can I introduce ask her to introduce herself, my colleague, Antoinette, who will give us a picture of the situation in Bulgaria.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, everyone. Well, the disinformation in Bulgaria is not as persuasive as in Serbia, but nevertheless, Bulgaria is the most vulnerable to Russia propaganda country in the European Union. And for several consecutive years, Bulgaria was at the bottom of the Media Freedom Index for Europe. It's Bulgarian media. I mean, the mainstream media follows more or less decent standards. They are not spreading directly disinformation. The problem for Bulgaria is the presence of certain actors. And the problem is that, for instance, the highest level of the politics in Bulgaria is openly pro-Russian. If you see the TV presence of such actors, you will see how the Russian propaganda is so easily spread into Bulgaria. Unlike Serbia, yes, Bulgaria is in the European Union, and like Serbia, Bulgarian population feel close and historically linked to Russia. That's why it's not so hard to take the hearts of the Bulgarians, especially if you're not giving the proper information. In 2023, still, most of the Bulgarians are getting informed by the television. 3 hours is the time that the average of the Bulgarians spending in front of the TV, but 4 hours and a half is the time that active age people are spending, we are getting information. So having that big market dominated by pro-Russian commentators, that we have people that are still putting in doubt the massacre in Bucha, well, it's not an easy task to fight this. And consider that in Bulgaria we have the boss, the director of the media regulator, who openly blame the Western countries that spread the propaganda about Bucha, claiming that Bucha was staged. So if you have the regulator who is supposed to oversight, let's say, the health of the media, it's very hard for independent media who are struggling for funding, who are struggling to get some advertising revenues, to fight such kind of almost institutional pressure.
And we heard from Serbia that there are specific advertisers, international advertisers, who are supporting TV channels. What are the indications or evidence in terms of international advertising supporting some of these web portals that you've been referring to that are providing disinformation in Bulgaria?
If you're asking me, I can give you numbers. I prefer to say the numbers. 70% of the Bulgarian advertising market is fueled by international companies, 70%. And I mean, they use what Claire has just mentioned, the local retailers, the so-called middlemen, and how they work, what is the system of the mechanism to give the money. It's really a very murky environment. Through manipulation, advertising budget, media ownership, and a lot of journalistic proxy, Russia disseminates this information. I can say who are the biggest faction. It's a Revival Party, who is openly pro-Russian, anti-European, anti-Western, and they still have a very strong presence in the parliament. We have also Russian narrative, easy to read in the Bulgarian media, especially in online media, that deals with very strategic arguments like energy, like foreign policy, and we have media and the TV channel, a party TV channel, the TV channel of the Bulgarian Socialist Party, who are openly pro-Russia. Then there is another phenomenon, maybe in Bulgaria only, comparing to other European Union countries, that media openly rely or quotes information from Russia media. And I'm talking about RIA Novosti. Bulgarian media pretty often quotes Russian agency, even for event happening in Germany or in Brussels.
Thank you, Antoinette. So you've started to explain, Claire, but if you can dive into a little bit more detail, who are these middlemen? Who owns them? What rules do they work under? And what, if anything, can be done to address the way that they're putting adverts on these kinds of low-quality sites?
Okay, so programmatic advertising is a lot more complicated than direct advertising. What I mean by programmatic advertising is it works on a system of real-time bidding, just like a stock market. Advertisers, via middlemen, are bidding for placements on websites. So I'm going to take us back just a second. The reason that advertising is so important is because for propagandists, advertising is everything they want. Ads give money, of course. They also they plug in to an incredible source of data so that you can better and better target people who are susceptible to lies or who might be undecided voters. Ads also give legitimacy to lies. When you go to a website and you're not sure if it's a made-for-advertising website or a disinformation website or a real news website, when you see trusted brands advertising on that website, it helps give the news articles legitimacy. And so to these people, to propagandists, advertising, the digital supply chain, is gold. Now, the internet was built, as I said, to promote products and services, and now it has been weaponized to sell xenophobia and propaganda. But it has not done so with advertisers' permission. Advertisers the world over have set a standard called brand safety, where they have said that they do not want to be associated with, and I quote exactly from the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, the insensitive, irresponsible, and harmful treatment of sensitive social issues. That means when an outlet is using a wedge issue to drive division in society, advertisers want nothing to do with it. They've built their brand for decades. They know what brand equity is. They know what brand association does. And they do not want to be associated with things that are uncomfortable, let alone causing real-world violence. The outcome of this is that they have pressured ad exchanges, those middlemen I was talking about. Advertisers don't place ads themselves on the internet. They have ad agencies who then have dashboards to big middlemen, who then bid with smaller middlemen, who then put the ads on websites. Okay, there's a supply chain of ads from the advertiser to the website. Every single middleman along the supply chain has said, we only work with premium publishers, and we uphold a standard of brand safety. That means no climate change disinformation. That means no COVID-19 disinformation. And at the very top, if you're into your computers or your phones right now and you Google, ironically, Google Publisher Policy, at the very top, in highlight, Google Publisher Policy, you will see no Russian propaganda. And they put that there as soon as Russia invaded Ukraine. They said no Russia propaganda. And yet, in Bulgaria, Google is funding 100 of the websites that we identified today, and they are sending advertisements from Europe and America to these websites without the advertisers even knowing.
So what's going wrong? You quoted this sort of very noble brand safety standards that the advertisers and the corporates are saying they're upholding, but then they're using these middlemen. Whose responsibility is that? Who should be doing something about ensuring that the rules that they've agreed to are upheld?
Up and down the supply chain, the question is who is in charge? Google is the organization that is allegedly upholding standards, and they are the ones claiming these standards. But Google answers almost to nobody, not even to the advertisers. And so it is up to the advertisers to check their ads, and it is up to consumers and regulators and parliaments to hold advertisers accountable and to hold Google accountable for these transgressions.
Thank you. I mean, we're in the European Parliament, a place that upholds a variety of human rights, including freedom of expression. So clearly, the balancing that needs to be struck needs to be thought about carefully. I want to ask our initial speakers to talk about what they think should happen in the particular countries of Serbia and then Bulgaria, and then I'll turn to Oliver to widen it in terms of this broader question of what the right policy measures should be. But so first of all, Raša, if you can talk about what you think should happen in Serbia and who should take action to deal with the problem that you initially identified.
Thank you very much. Well, I believe that this House should be the leading political agent for change as well in Serbia. Serbia is the EU candidacy country. We are supposed to uphold the values of the European Union. And what we can see in Serbian media, our political elites are fantastic traders. You know, like those when they're speaking to members of the parliament here or with the representatives of the Commission or different dignitaries from the EU or the other countries, they're the most pro-European, pro-Western politicians ever you can speak with. But when they're back home, then something else happened. So they are in a constant campaign. As I said, my organization, CRTA, we are monitoring the media, the most influential one, so TV stations, dailies, and also online portals of most influential media outlets. And the trend for the EU is negative. So disproportionately big in negative reporting about the EU. In recent months, we are tracking some less amount of negative articles about the US, which could be related with some alterations of the editorial policy in fragments of editorial policy of TV Pink. But again, this not affects in a positive way towards the EU. So we believe that EU should be much more frank in conversation with our political elites and demand clear policies that will actually provide in the media pluralism. If we want to be a democratic society, we cannot have one single-minded, one-sided information program, news program. We need to provide different voices and actors to, in dialogue, discuss different matters. That's not the case. So while we are ignoring these facts, we are basically legitimizing spin dictatorship in Serbia and pretending that we have government in Serbia that is going to deliver maybe some on the foreign plan agenda like progress in a dialogue with the Kosovo, or maybe introducing sanctions against Russia. Well, if that is the hope of the Western political sphere, then I can ask, how come that one political leadership in country that controls media in such a way that I just explained is not creating and preparing citizens for these strong, different political decisions, like progressing in a dialogue with the Kosovo in a meaningful way, where people will not suffer anymore, right? Or if we are preparing our citizens for changing our foreign policy and actually aligning with the EU foreign policy, how come that EU is at the worst of popularity in Serbia with so strong media control?
So thank you. So the accession process should be being used by the EU's institutions. But in terms of Bulgaria, it's a country that's already in the EU. So what are the policy remedies? What are the responses that could potentially tackle the situation that you outlined, Antoinette?
Look, I'm going to say something that probably Oliver won't be so happy. As we conducted together a campaign regarding the media freedom law, which is prepared. Here's to be voted next month. Okay. So we have on one side the Russia propaganda machine, relying on a big, huge amount of money. On the European side, we have the EU versus Disinfo office with something like less than 50 people. So imagine working, fighting for integrity, a democratic media standards in a region where, as I said, traditionally, the Russia played historical role. It's not enough just with underestimated what is the force of the other side. So I wouldn't say Europe should give us more money, but why not? Yes, I would say Europe probably should pay attention when we talk about regulators, when we talk about basic professional standards, ethical standards, and help to provide our requirements for the regulator bodies that represent, that should exercise, control, and guarantee a democratic media market.
Thank you. So in a few minutes, I'm going to open it up, so please start thinking of the questions that you want to pose to the panel. But we've already set up one of the issues we want to address from the panel, which is that balance of rights and how media quality and media freedom can be preserved. So can I ask Oliver to introduce himself and his organisation, reflect on what he's heard, but also talk about what might positively be done by international advertisers to support high quality media.
Thanks very much, Peter. Wow, this is a complex issue, isn't it? I work for the International Press Institute. We're based in Vienna. We do a lot of work on Central and Eastern Europe, and particularly on things like media capture. And I've read the draft reports here, and I think it's absolutely brilliant, and it's frightening, and it's exhaustive in its identification of the problems and some of the revealing some of the severity of the media situation in some of these countries. And I'm not an expert on Serbia. I'm quite familiar with Bulgaria, and I've just come back from Poland. It's a different situation in Poland, but the question of advertising is a very big one. There, the problem is where it's not talk about the big brands and where they allocate their funds. It's about where states are spending or discriminating in the distribution of state advertising against independent media and critical voices. And this is a problem we see throughout the region. It's not exclusive to Central Eastern Europe at all. And this, in terms of policies, he talks about the European Media Freedom Act. That's something that we're trying to address, and it's expected that once it's passed, national governments will be required to end that discrimination, which means they should, first of all, be completely transparent about how they fund, about the funding that is spent directly by governments or through state companies to media, and also to have a non-discriminatory, a fair and balanced system for doing that. Whether that happens or not is another matter, but that's a sort of policy initiative, which is quite different from the sort of policy initiatives we're talking about here, about trying to encourage global private brands to discriminate against media that they don't like. So it's quite a sort of counterintuitive approach to the sort of discussions we've been having. I think it's quite useful to take a step back. I'm really glad we talked about Google. Google mentioned earlier, because Google has an awful lot to answer for. I don't know if anybody here in the room is representing Google. Probably. But you know, it's not just that we discover about, okay, you have the impressive policy statements, but the fact that they are sending all of this money to disinformation outlets. More broadly, they have, you know, the monopoly that they have over the advertising process, which desperately needs to be broken up, has suffocated and starved independent media across Europe, and beyond. And that is the real cause of the journalistic crisis that we see in Europe today, and particularly in Central Eastern Europe. Look, Poland's not in a bad position. It's in a difficult position, but compared to other countries in Central Eastern Europe, why? Because it still has a lot of foreign investment in media. It's a big market, it's robust, you can still make profits. But in every other country, media are owned by national oligarchs. Why? Because investors had to sell because they can no longer make a profit, because the advertising system which funded media collapsed. Why was the advertising system so important? Because it gave a level of protection. It gave a level of protection to independent media, so they could not be vulnerable to political interference. And one of the sort of red flags I have about this, particularly sort of thinking about Bulgaria, the report talks about the broadcasters have, it's not pure disinformation that we have been told about in Serbia. It's much more balanced, but they are giving voice to uncomfortable views that we're not happy with, views that are anti-EU or they're pro-Russian. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being anti-EU. That's not non-journalistic in itself. But it does raise a particular problem about how you define what disinformation is and who does that define. And that's something we've got to come to. But another question, if these broadcasters start losing the funding that they receive from the commercial, you say that there is a level of balance, that makes them more vulnerable to those that keep funding, that are funding the disinformation. And there's a risk that actually you end up creating more disinformation than less. But I'll pause there, because I was told it's to an open discussion.
I just wanted to say that I agree with that, but the problem is that if you cannot present all sides when we are in such a terrible war. I mean, we cannot present the other point of view if we are talking about Nazi. So we're in an extraordinary situation. The world will be nice if we are living just our normal democratic life, but we are not. And so in this kind of situation like right now, I mean, today in Bulgaria, there is a big protest. We don't know if our democracy will still stand solid. So you're right, but in a normal situation.
Thanks, Antoinette. I'm going to ask Mr. Kovatchev to comment on what he's heard so far, and then I'll throw it open, but I'm sure we'll hear more from the discussion within the panel as well.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to all of you. I was talking about what Raša said about preparing the citizens. If the leadership of a country is fair or it's real in their statements about, for example, European integration, that they should use the media channel to prepare the citizens for very unpopular also decisions like Pristina-Belgrade dialogue, or mutual recognition, etc., and not pushing in the other direction. Or the example in Bulgaria, if we are going to join the Eurozone, then we should prepare and counteract to all kinds of disinformation, and the responsible authorities like the National Bank, for example, should be every night or every evening in the media and preparing the people, saying that it's not true, that everything will be double, etc. All this fake news and disinformation, what is spread. Or if in North Macedonia they are firm with the proposal for the starting of the negotiations, they need to prepare the citizens for the change in the constitution, and not the media spreading exactly the opposite and increasing the fear among them. But what Antoinette said, Oliver, I think, how to define what is disinformation, what is not disinformation. I had many meetings with Meta, and I don't know if somebody from Meta is here. But that is a big debate with them, and they have a lot of responsibility, especially in markets where they, so to say, online share as a platform is a very big to not that the freedom of expression, the basic principle of democracy, is misused by forces who would like using a basic principle of democracy to dismiss democracy. If they come to power, there will be no freedom of expression. Let's think about 1933 in Germany. Democracy should have some kind of immune system to resist against these forces who use or misuse democratic principle to come to power, to remove all democratic principles, and people who ask for such measurements to violence and spread disinformation in this way should be not, at least not so much visible. I don't know how it's working, the algorithms, and the platforms don't like to open their algorithms, how they use, but we see that sometimes let's say, European or Euro-Atlantic messages on Facebook have moderate visibility, not so many, even less. But if you have pro-Kremlin statement, then sometimes the visibility is very, very high. For me, it's totally ununderstandable how it is possible, why it's happened, and I don't like to quote some private companies on this, but this is a big topic. We are a leader here in the Parliament and in the European Union with the DSA, DMA, with now, as was mentioned, the European Media and Freedom Act, to somehow try to do the both. From one side, protect the freedom of expression, and from other side, to regulate the online world, and to support critical journalism, objective journalism, critical thinking, education, all these topics which are extremely important for our society and for the young generation, that they are not victims of disinformation, targeted disinformation campaign from either from inside or from outside.
Thank you, Andrey. So let's open it up. Either of you'd like to comment or question in relation to the identification of the problem in Serbia or Bulgaria, or on the policy remedies that we've started to discuss. Yes, please.
Thank you, Peter. My name is Georgi Gotev from Euractiv. I have a few comments, perhaps sharing a little bit of my journalistic experience in Bulgaria, my country of origin, and a question to Claire Atkin. Now, I heard that TV was the main source of information, but as Mr. Kovatchev said, I think the role of Facebook should not be neglected. The role of Facebook is huge, and in Facebook messaging you can find really lots of crazy things. Even journalists, by the way, disseminate fake news. Sometimes I react and say, don't you see this is fake news? They say, yes, but it's interesting. You know, when I was a journalist in Bulgaria, that was during the Yugoslav wars, I realized that me and my colleagues, we were kind of living in a different world. You know, especially on Saturday, it happens that in the newspaper when I was working, one single journalist produces the international page. And when I was producing the international page, it looked in one way, and when a colleague produced it, it looked in a completely different way. And I asked myself why. And the question is that I was using mostly Western sources, starting with Reuters, and my colleagues, they speak better, they understand better Russian than English. They use Lenta.ru. That's a Russian kind of wire, and basically the product, the news of the day, produced by Lenta.ru and Reuters, they have nothing in common. These are two different worlds, and I noticed that early on, but I think this trend continues. Now, coming back closer to the subject of you know, the advertising and so on, I'm a little bit skeptical as to what can be done, because I just returned from Bulgaria, and I noticed that the advertising in Bulgaria is dominated by, I think, 3 categories: online gambling, domestic companies, by the way, the vape business, you know, the electronic cigarettes, and the alcohol business. Do you think that these major advertisers will play the game? And, you know, I mean, a question to Claire. Yeah, I mean, I maybe I should stop. I have many things to say, but...
Let's get that answered, and I'm interested. Have there been examples where action has been taken and change has happened as a result of the kind of interventions you're talking about, Claire, in other parts of the world?
Thank you for asking. Could I ask some follow-up questions? Did you see those advertisements on cable or on the websites?
The funniest way is to drive by car from Sofia to the seaside. You will see billboards, and you will see hundreds of advertising: online gambling, vape, alcohol. Online gambling, vape, alcohol. And when you watch television, online gambling is really top, number one.
Okay, thank you. Very quickly, you mentioned Facebook, and I think it's important to talk about Facebook, or Meta, because Facebook amplifies and profits from disinformation. Everybody knows this, and over again, they have, in bad faith, positioned the problem as a post-by-post problem. Oh, we'll describe a post that should be banned, or how do we deal with a post that has this kind of content? When they should be, and what anyone in this room would be doing, is looking at who are the most consistent, systematic spreaders of disinformation on Facebook per country, and how have they violated the terms of service. It should be by user, not by post. So I will say that. In addition, Facebook is not where disinformation makes money. Disinformation makes money when users see the posts on Facebook and click on the link and go to a website. And that is where a dozen or so ad exchanges are waiting to serve ads to that user, to that citizen. And that is where the website owner makes money. They make no money on Facebook, but they do make money when they trap people to go to the website where they have business relationships with ad exchanges. Again, against the knowledge of advertisers. You asked, Peter, if there were examples of ad exchanges, those middlemen on the programmatic platforms, acting when people brought attention to these issues. I'll give you an American example. I'm sorry to bring American examples to Europe. Last year, it was a very rare occurrence. The Director of National Security in America identified 4 Russian psyops, 4 Russian websites in America that were pretending to be American, that were manipulating the American public, and they identified them publicly and sanctioned them. They said anyone working with these companies will get 20 years in prison and heavy fines. Well, months later, we found 12 different ad exchanges working with Stormfront, one of the Russian psyops. And within 24 hours of us reporting on this in our little newsletter, every single ad exchange dropped that Russian disinformation outlet because they knew that it was against their terms of service, they knew that it violated their publisher policies, and they knew that the advertisers did not want to go to jail for 20 years and did not want to pay heavy fines. I have more examples, but that's the biggest one.
Thank you. Are there other questions or comments that people would like to make? Yes, please.
Hi. I'm Chris Anastasov. I was from Bulgaria. And listening to all the approach that came from you, I've noticed that, and listening to all that's coming from the European Union, by the way, and it's not only about Bulgaria or Serbia. We have a major actor as Hungary, which is completely dominated, obviously, media-wise, and then public opinion-wise, by Kremlin's propaganda. And what I hear, including from you, it's kind of censorship, which is, for me, I think like Mrs. Nikolova, fine in times of war, and how to counter with diminishing the flow of money to propaganda, which is fine. I think that we all forget of one tool that we'll have to adapt creatively to our times and our technology. And we forget that we are not the first democracy in war. And we forget that someone said that Winston Churchill had 3 armies: the Royal Navy, the 8th Royal Army, and the BBC. The problem is that we as the European Union, we don't have the BBC of the Second World War. And my question, this is more of a rhetorical question actually, if I may allow myself, isn't it time for us to think of a big pole that is actually standing for the truth, like the BBC used to do during Second World War? And I'm sure that being creative and being in a technological revolution, we may have this big pole of disseminating the truth. Thank you.
Thank you. As someone who used to be responsible for the BBC World Service, so I appreciate your comment. And whilst we all think about what that big idea might be, can I ask a colleague at the back to make a comment or question, and then the panel will then respond. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Marisa Jimenez. I represent the META, Mr. Kovatchev. Good afternoon. Obviously, obliged comment from my side. We don't profit from mis or disinformation. That doesn't mean that there is no disinformation or misinformation on the platform, but I categorically can say that we don't profit from it. No, we don't. We have been working for many years on this. I want to see how many companies have put the efforts that this company has put in fighting mis and disinformation, working with this House, working with the European Commission on the code, hiring professionals to fight against disinformation. Have we solved the problem? Absolutely not. But we are hearing here how difficult this issue is when you even have media channels, official televisions that they're actually spreading misinformation as well. This is an extremely complex issue. So, first of all, I don't want to minimize the issue, but I cannot agree with the fact that we profit from it, or that we would even want to profit. Why would we want to do this? I had a comment about the Media Freedom Act. I think that the Media Freedom Act has many angles, and the objectives are very laudable, and we support that. However, there is a part of that which is in contradiction with what we are speaking today, which is there are some parts of the Media Act that want platforms to restrict content moderation even further. So it goes contrary to what we are hearing today, that we have to do more content moderation, while parts of the Media Freedom Act are saying we need to do less content moderation depending on the actor. If it's a media service provider, then it is de facto checked, and therefore they cannot be any harm. And I'm wondering whether you have thought about that angle as well. Thank you.
Great. Can we take those two things in turn? So, first of all, the issue of whether Meta is or isn't profiting from disinformation, and then we'll come to the Media Freedom Act with Andrey in a second.
In 2016, 4,000 advertisers dropped Breitbart.com, the voice of the alt-right news outlet run by Steve Bannon that arguably got Donald Trump elected. That's what they claim anyway. 4,000 advertisers. And all the ad agencies set a standard. And then 31 of 35 ad exchanges dropped Breitbart.com. This summer, Breitbart hit the Facebook top 10 posts more times than I can count. You are not only, Meta, not you personally, you are not only profiting from disinformation, you are amplifying it. Top 10 posts? This is the most brand unsafe website that the advertising industry has ever identified. It had a whole section dedicated to black-on-black crime. And Meta promotes Facebook every week, along with Dan Bongino and Fox News and all of the other people who make the most money off of spreading bigotry, xenophobia, and racism. Nobody is making money off of that except Facebook, whose ads are right next to that content. Thank you.
Media Freedom Act.
Okay, on the Media Freedom Act, this is a debate in this House, very German-driven, because the idea is, and sorry to be very open, why we should allow American company, private company, to check our Süddeutsche Zeitung, Frankfurter Allgemeine, very high-level standard German press or Le Figaro, etc., where some colleagues think that this is a high standard quality media, and we should not only Meta but others be, so to say, judging about register it under the national legislation in the member states, high-level journalism. But I do not share the same, like my colleague Sabine or other colleagues, because this is a very vague issue. How exactly you define high-level quality media? Not all Frankfurter Allgemeine, or not all in Europe. So this is a debate which we are going to continue here in the European Parliament to see what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. And Oliver, your view on the Media Freedom Act and its relevance to our discussion today?
Oh, okay. This is Article 17, isn't it? I mean, one of the big problems of the Media Freedom Act is that it's been dominated by massive arguments about Article 17. So I'm kind of reluctant to get drawn into it. But basically what you're saying is that there's an attempt to create an exclusive a group of media actors who will not be subject to your content moderation. Why? Because, we're in favour of it under certain conditions. That is to say that it should be, if you can define who independent quality media are. And actually that comes back to the same problem that we're trying to discuss here. How do you distinguish between open, pluralist, diverse media that are, yes, they will get, that also it's quite useful to have the Russian viewpoint on this, because that at least informs us. I know it's not, I really understand the sensitivity around this, about, because you read the report and there's some really, really painful stuff that you read. But we're also talking about principles and processes here, and trying to work out what the solutions are that you can put in place in a democratic society. So yes, we're in favour of it, but the question is, how do you define who those actors are? And if you listen to publishers, and some of the best publishers in the world that we need to support, their problem is that you take their advertising money. That's their real problem. Coming back, and I use this opportunity just to go back to the solutions, and the problem I tried to identify earlier was, who is it that decides when something's disinformation? I find it much easier to talk about how you put money into quality media than how you take it out of potential disinformation actors. But I think there are some quite interesting initiatives, and I think the sort of crediting or rating or distinguishing between what are quality media and what are not quality media should be done by mechanisms and processes which are built by the journalistic community. And we've got Julie in the corner, who represents Reporters Without Borders, who have mentioned this report because they have something called the Journalism Trust Initiative. She can explain it much better than I can, but it's about auditing and crediting and certifying, not the content. This is really crucial. It's not the content. And so it's not the individual post. That doesn't matter. It's the process, and it's the funding, and it's the transparency, and it's having about the quality of the journalistic process that is vital, and it's not about the individual content. And if Meta and Google can start adopting similar things about the way they deal with disinformation, the problem, 30 more seconds, the problem with disinformation is that every good bit of disinformation has a kernel of truth to it. And they take that kernel of truth and then they twist it and repackage it and present it as opposite world views. It's not that there isn't any truth to it. So how do it's an interminable problem, but I think we should be looking at processes about how we build and funnel advertising money into quality media. That's a much more interesting and a much more productive conversation, I think.
Do you want to come in and explain a little bit more about how this positive ratings approach could assist this situation?
Yes, thank you. So I'm working for Reporters Without Borders, and we had this idea a few years ago because we could feel that with the social network becoming the public space where the debate is going on, and where people now are getting the news, it was important to be able to distinguish media sources, reliable media sources of information and disinformation. And we see that today there is an information chaos online, and we are not really convinced by the negative moderation of content. First, because it's endless, and secondly, because it comes too late, and also because it's not very in line with the idea of freedom of expression. So what we believe is that we should put disinformation back in the margin, because disinformation has always existed, but it was in the margin. But now, because of the way the social networks work, it is at the center, and quality media, reliable source of information, are at the margin, and we want to put them back at the center. And for this, we have elaborated the Journalism Trust Initiative, which, as Oliver said, is not, doesn't evaluate or assess the content of each articles, but only the process. And then the media are certified by an independent auditing company. And now GTI is a standard. It has been elaborated under the aegis of the European Standardization Committee. It has more than 100 of criteria which are linked, as Oliver said, about transparency, ownership, about ethical rules. We haven't reinvented the wheel. We have put all the professional rules and principles of journalism into the standard, and GTI is machine readable. So what we think would be probably a better way to tackle disinformation than the negative curation of deletion is to have an obligation to the platform to promote reliable sources of information based on trust indicators or standards like GTI. That's our approach.
Thank you very much for explaining that, and that's been a very useful building on quality journalism. Let me hear your comment, and I want to come to Russia again.
Yeah, my name is Tanas Chubanov. I'm an investigative reporter from Bulgarian site bird.bg. Just to say about the Journalist Trust Initiative, it's a very good idea. We started applying, but the process is so bureaucratic that we are now looking for the whole paperwork before we can apply, you know. So that probably big outlets can dedicate time and a person to apply for such vetting. But there is a very simple approach. Take the big journalism awards, take the Pulitzers, take the European Press Award, take 5 or 6 more renowned journalistic awards, okay? We know them. The list is not so big. So take the people awarded and put them in the whitelist. Meta, please. That's very simple and very efficient, because it's a self-moderation by the journalists who give the awards to their peers that guarantee that they are high quality. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to bring it back to the starting point of our conversation, which is the responsibility that large corporates and advertisers have. And taking it to Serbia specifically, what would happen if there was an advertising boycott of the outlets that you referred to? Would it make any difference given the way that the information environment in Serbia is controlled? Would it be a good thing, a bad thing? Tell us what the impact would be if these businesses did what you were recommending.
It would be a huge impact. When we broke this story about how European companies are knowingly or unknowingly sustaining spread of information manipulation in Serbian media, there were from the advertising world messages started to come around that we are trying to suffocate advertising in Serbia. What we need here is similar attempt that was done in 2018, where big tech companies joined and signed the self-regulatory code of conduct for fighting disinformation. All major big companies signed that protocol, from Meta, X, even TikTok in 2020. So it is already there, the discussion is there, but I think that we now need to expand the discussion on the traditional media, and where, of course, that the social media and internet plays a significant role. But if you are trying to cope with this issue in a country where the biggest source of information manipulation are public officials, where the biggest percentage of the articles containing manipulative content are coming from the journalists themselves, then we have an issue. So what we need is I would say that maybe the only opportunity for Serbia in this context is if European Parliament would initiate a public discussion with different stakeholders, with advertiser companies, advertisers themselves, on how this issue could be. We need to make them allies with the big companies. Without them, I would believe that our fight is basically doomed. Because without space in our information world back in Serbia that is backed with companies, we are completely locked out of opportunity for citizens to have even prospects of democracy.
And answering the same question in relation to Bulgaria, if big international advertisers switch from supporting these disinformation sites towards supporting the kind of quality media, independent media that Oliver was talking about, what difference could that make in Bulgaria?
Look, Bulgaria media market relying on the Western companies, as I said, on the TV and the mainstream media. They are big player, they can make the difference. I think if they're out, it will be a problem, because in this case we will have to deal only with the state, European Union funding, which is not so clear, and that's not so clear how it's distributed. So the big companies are important for the Bulgarian media market. But what is the problem is that they are retailer. And I think the big companies just has to put, I wouldn't say big condition, but kind of a policy or standards if using their name after in such in the disinformation narrative or in the narrative that is misleading, because as Oliver said, a good disinformation is not something which is lie. Sometimes it's packed with half true, half not true, or something that just quoted from somewhere.
Thank you. We've got about 10 minutes or so left. I just want to make sure that our panellists have an opportunity if there's anything that we haven't covered. But our colleague from Meta, I saw you wanted to come in a few minutes ago. Is there anything further you wanted to say?
Yeah, just a reaction on the previous discussion to close it up. I think that the conversation here on GTI is very interesting because we agree here. I think that it's not about and that's the point that I wanted to make. When you make a privilege to an actor, so you're trying to solve an issue by making a privilege on an actor, not looking at the content. I agree with you that we should look at the content, but if we are going to do that privilege to the actor, it has to be under very, very clear criteria. So initiatives like JTI and that really have this clear criteria can be a solution. Whitelisting can be a solution to this issue within the Media Freedom Act. It's just that the question, though, it's a difference between an exception on harmful content, depending on who the actor is, to a conversation about a privilege because you need to protect a level of quality in journalism. So if we move the conversation from an exception to a privilege to solve a problem, focusing on process rather than focusing on the content, I think that there's something where some of the platforms really can come closer and can actually agree.
Thank you. Andrey, do you want to comment on that?
Only to comment, because I like this idea to have trusted indicators which will somehow, as you said, privilege these actors who are trusted and fulfill some indicators, but the same will be also for the other side, for the black side, that these untrusted actors, and then we don't need to look all of their content today and yesterday, and blah, 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 but if they identified as black sheep, then they should be not privileged. And this is coming to my question, and we discussed many times also with you and with other about the algorithms of the company, not only your company, but all online companies, which how they promote, so to say, the trusted, and how they the other side of promote, not to dispromote, also the downgrade the untrusted. And this is what, for me, is still not understandable, because from what I see is that some very untrusted sources are heavily promoted. This is why we should work more on this topic. Yeah.
Thank you. Claire, would you like to summarise towards the end? Thank you.
Thank you. So we're in a situation where for the past 30 years, the internet has been built on top of itself, on the backs of the idea that we have to personally target people with advertising. So it used to be that when you wanted to advertise, you would call up a newspaper and you would say, put me on B2 or put me on A1. And advertisers had control over where their ads were going. Now, it's very easy to see us up on stage here today and think, well, who are they to decide who gets advertising dollars and who doesn't? And the answer is, it's not us. It's the middlemen. It's Facebook and Google and Magnite and Pubmatic and Teads and Triple Lift. Every one of these middlemen are traffic controlling ads, money, and data. And they are deciding where these resources go. They are going to make or break the media climate globally moving forward. Right now, the GDP of digital advertising is somewhere between $500 and $700 billion. Nobody knows how big it is. $500 to $700 billion. A few years ago, it was 400 billion. A couple years before that, it was 200 billion. It is drastically increasing. And these kingmakers are the ones that are starving journalism and giving a carte blanche to white nationalism, xenophobia, Russian disinformation, climate change disinformation, election disinformation. And we have to hold them accountable for what we see today.
Thank you, Claire. And last thoughts from Oliver.
I mean, look, I've come towards this with quite a lot of caution and concern about potentially what we're talking about. But I do think if we can get over some of those issues about how you distinguish between disinformation, etc., I think we could be talking about an absolute transformative process here. I mean, I was expecting Antoinette to say if we could sort of redistribute funds that actually went to the actors who were producing quality information, and that could be absolutely transformative in the Bulgarian media scene. I think there are two things that we need to do. First of all, we have to reconstruct that economic model where quality journalism pays, where it pays, you can make a profit and people will invest. And if you invest, then you will not be beholden to oligarchs that are tied to national governments that want to do their bidding. Part of that making it pay is breaking up Google and Meta and the rest, who have dominated and taken over such a huge amount of advertising, which sustained and created the resilience that media had before. And the other element of it is, again, coming back to examples how put the certifying of quality media into the hands of journalists, whether it's through journalism prizes or auditing, or in the Czech Republic they have a rating system. There's something called the National Endowment for Funding Media there, which gives a rating to quality independent media. And as a result, the leading search engine, which is oddly not Google in the Czech Republic, actually it is now, but it didn't used to be, for many years it wasn't, it was Seznam, and they promote, because the media that score highly on this rating, they tweak the algorithm so that it goes higher up the list. It's these sorts of initiatives that we need to be promoting so that we can drive money towards quality media and away from bad.
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you to all of our panellists, and thank you to all of you for bringing your expertise to the conversation. I'd particularly like to thank our colleague from Meta, because it's really good to engage and to have this kind of discussion. We've been referring to a report. That report isn't yet published. It will be within the next few weeks. We just wanted to make sure we get it absolutely right. And part of what we wanted to do was to have this discussion today, to hear your input and feedback in order to be able to make sure that the report reflects the right range of views and is completely accurate. So do look out for that. And Balkans Free Media Initiative and its Twitter X site or feed is where you will see that appear shortly. Thank you very much for coming. I'd like to invite Andrey, our kind host, to close.
Thank you very much, Peter. Before I thank you also to you and to close, I would like to give one of my observations when I started here, from where we start at the beginning, before the war in Ukraine. Many colleagues, especially from left and center, said, no, we should on European level do nothing because we are not state censorship, we don't do counter-propaganda. This is leave it to the self-regulation of the market. They are going to do, if something is wrong or disinformation, they are going to correct this. That was the beginning. So now we saw that the other side is using a very targeted disinformation campaign. We have this troll factory in St. Petersburg. We have many other evidence that we are target of very sophisticated disinformation campaign. We're trying to change the public perception, public opinion, change electoral behavior, etc., which is very dangerous for every democracy. We started with a small unit in Istratcom in the Commission, and now end up with the two committees, with the DSA, DMA, with the European Media and Freedom Act, and with other initiatives how to regulate. Because it's also a philosophical question: is include the basic democratic principle of freedom of expression, also the freedom to lie. And many say, yes, this is democratic, everybody is allowed to lie. And then is the obligation of the others to say, no, he is lying. But in the globalized world where we have so much exposure of a lie, this can go to a very dangerous situation. This is why the disinformation, if you like, or lies, should be not promoted. In any case, we should do everything that these are staying very low under the radar, not having harm to the public opinion, and trying to change our democracy by misusing democratic principles. So I will repeat my statement which I made last week in the plenary. Democracy needs to have also an immune system to resist the attempt to dismiss democracy by misusing democratic principles. Thank you very much again. I think the topic is extremely important, and we will continue this fruitful discussion also by bilateral meetings with all stakeholders on this ground. Thank you. Good afternoon.